The very same war being waged on Iran is unfolding in Africa right now. And when I say the same war, I mean that quite literally. What may look like separate conflicts, America and Israel versus Iran, Russia versus Ukraine, are in fact deeply connected. And those connections are now producing increasingly deadly consequences across the continent of Africa. If you think these wars are only about oil and resources, then it's likely you're missing the bigger picture. So if you want to understand how the latest developments in Mali and Africa's Sahel conflict have intensified and how it connects to other major conflicts, as well as why this matters for the interests of every African across the continent, then this video is for you. So many of you will know on the 25th of April, just a few days ago, the largest coordinated military attack in West Africa in over a decade hit 5 cities simultaneously in the country of Mali. Bamako, the capital, Kidal, Kita, and Sévaré. 5 cities, one morning across a front nearly 2,000 kilometers wide. That kind of operation takes months of planning, serious money, and real outside support. 2 armed groups carried it out, JNIM, which is Al-Qaeda's West Africa franchise, and the FLA, a Tuareg rebel group that want annexation of a portion, if not all, of Mali for themselves. So just 12 months before this attack, these 2 groups were fighting each other. They are not natural partners. Their sudden unity against one target tells you something bigger is behind all of this. The morning after the attack, Mali's defense minister was killed by a suicide car bomb at his personal home. You do not place a bomb inside the private home of a minister without having the means to research and do recon and understand the ins and outs of the enemy that you're facing. Along with this high-ranking minister, members of his family were killed. This was not a local uprising getting out of hand. This was a coordinated campaign, and the question is, who benefits? To answer that, we need to look no further than how the war in Iran actually works, because the same approach is now being used in the Sahel. The Iran conflict is not fundamentally about nuclear weapons, regardless of whatever is said on mainstream media. Rather, it's a piece of a puzzle that is designed to keep the Western hegemony at the top of the global hierarchy. That is really what all of this is about. And from what we're witnessing around the world, there appears to be no limit to the overt and covert means they will take to maintain their position at the top. So when it comes to wars like the war in Iran, I've identified 4 key tools that are used in the fight for dominance and imperial reign: control of media, control and the blocking of resources, being cut off the financial and money grids, and lastly, funding and arming rebel groups to bleed the country from the inside first. Now, you should not be surprised that these 4 tools are being used and continue to be used in Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso. Anyone that's been watching my channel will know that these 3 countries formed the Alliance of Sahel States after all 3 removed Western-backed governments, expelled French military forces, and chose to run their own affairs. Their combined territory is 2.78 million square kilometers, nearly twice the size of Iran. Their combined population is just under 70 million people. One might say the Sahel group is comparable in a number of ways to Iran. Now we have to think about energy. Niger alone supplies 25% of all uranium imported by the European Union. France runs 70% of its electricity on nuclear power. These are not small or insignificant countries. Like Iran, they control critical resources that keep Western economies running. And now they have made a decision that those resources will be owned, managed, and sold on their own terms to benefit their own people rather than foreign powers. I mean, how dare they? That directly challenges the status quo that has existed for decades, even centuries. A status quo where Western countries have benefited more despite those resources coming from these nations. I just want to take a quick moment to thank everybody that has subscribed to my Substack. I really appreciate the support. If you're out there and you want to support this message of African sovereignty, then I highly recommend that you head over there as well. On a platform like YouTube, a message like this can be shadow banned. I could even be deplatformed. It's happened to others in this space already. But if you subscribe to my newsletter, it means that you and I can have a direct dialogue via email without any intermediary that may want to censor this message. There is a paid tier if you want to support financially. That's about the cost of a coffee each month. But if you don't want to do that, there's a free tier. And so even if it's just for the purposes of keeping this message alive, you can go and subscribe totally for free. The link is in the description right now, and I look forward to connecting with you via email directly real soon. So let's take a closer look at how the Western hegemony is tied to this African war and the way it relates back to the greater conflict the world is experiencing right now. So let's start with step one, control the story. Within hours of the April 25th attack, French state media, including RFI and France 24, with a combined audience of over 12 million, were calling the attackers, terrorist attackers, Al-Qaeda, Jnim, liberators. The FLA spokesperson, whose group had just claimed responsibility for killing that defense minister and members of his family, flew to Paris and held a press conference. Not only that, he met with French officials. That access would never be given to an AES representative after such a heinous act. It shows what many of us already know. The French will do anything to get back control of that region, and they are willing to legitimize whoever they need to for that end. The playbook is simple. Call one side a regime, call the other side freedom fighters. Repeat until it becomes accepted. Control the narrative, and you control what the world believes about the situation. Look at Syria, a very similar situation. The current leader, whose roots in Al-Qaeda's network are now treated as legitimate and engaged diplomatically. In Africa, Jnim, a faction of Al-Qaeda from that same network, is labeled a terrorist and used to discredit the AES. Same roots, different framing. There are long-standing claims that Al-Qaeda itself grew out of networks funded and armed from the CIA, which claim holds more and more legitimacy as time moves on, especially given the fact that one of the main leaders of Al-Qaeda in Syria is now the president. Welcome with open arms both to Downing Street in London and the Oval Office in Washington. So when similar networks, connected networks, operate in Africa with weapons and reach beyond local capacity, the same question applies. The American military call media control information operations, but most of us know it by another word, propaganda. Whoever controls the story, the narrative, decides who is a terrorist, who is a partner, and what the world is told to support. And here in Africa is the proof playing out in real time. By day 5 of Mali's counter-offensive, independent reports were placing militant casualties in the thousands. Hideouts were being destroyed. The fighters who were supposed to be blockading Bamako were retreating. The same outlets that spent 4 days writing what you might call the obituary of the Malian state had almost nothing to say about any of the quelling and the subsequent destruction of the militant groups after the initial attacks took place. France 24 and the BBC covered the attack across multiple platforms, wall to wall. When the counter-offensive began, turning the tide, the coverage somehow just disappeared. In my opinion, that is not an oversight. It is the operation. It is the narrative that only serves the side that benefits from Africa looking defeated. Then we get on to step 2, blocking of resources. We've seen this play out, of course, in Iran. You've got the physical military blockade trying to block the Straits of Hormuz happening right now. But even before that, you had sanctions and other means to try and choke Iran into doing what they wanted them to do. Similarly, in Niger, there is a blockade. Right now, 1,000 tons of uranium, $360 million worth, sits in Niger, owned by Niger, and completely unsellable. There is a mining company, Orano, there is all types of disputes, and there is a physical block of this uranium ever since the Nigerian leader decided that they were not going to sell that uranium in the same way. Of course, this is not on the mainstream news. This is hard to find information compared with what's going on in the Strait of Hormuz. But the tactic is the same. The West is attempting to close Niger's access to its own uranium market through courts and insurance and companies, and they call it international law. Here's step 3, cut off the money. The moment the 3 AES governments chose independence, France ended budget support. The same financial pressure used against Iran through banking bans and sanctions is being applied here through different tools, but toward the same goal. As someone staying in Africa, it's hard enough sometimes to transfer money from Europe into the continent. And I transfer money into Uganda, which doesn't have those type of Western sanctions the way that Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso currently has. I can only think how difficult it will be to move money internationally in and out of the SWIFT banking system if you're one of these countries. All of this is designed to make trade and economic independence difficult. Step 4, fund the fight. Take a look at what's on the screen right now. The picture you're seeing is of FLA fighters. The flag they're holding is the Ukrainian flag. The symbol on their clothing is the Ukrainian trident, the same insignia worn by the Ukrainian military forces. It is not a conspiracy theory that the West meddles in the affairs of Africa for their own outcomes. It is published, it is documented, and this image is just one of the pieces of evidence that we could submit to make this argument. It tells you everything about who's backing these fighters. Ukraine has been documented supplying the FLA with FPV kamikaze drones, the same technology Ukraine uses against Russian forces. Ukraine's own intelligence confirmed it provided support, training, and other things that enabled a successful operation against Russian-aligned African forces. Just because these countries prefer to do business with Russia and no longer with countries like France. The European Union has committed over 6 billion euros in military support to Ukraine. France, of course, contributes to that fund. That money reaches Ukraine. Ukraine arms the FLA coordinates with Al-Qaeda to attack an African capital. The EU has formal laws banning support of Al-Qaeda affiliates. So the question is simple. Do they not know, or do they accept it? Because at this level, with the amount of money we're talking about, for economies in the West, oversight is not optional. This is not something that slips through unnoticed. And when you consider that France is being fully removed from the Sahel by these governments, the more likely answer becomes clear. This is not accidental. This is simply alignment. It's documented, and the freedom and peace and anti-war accountability that they throw around when convenient for them simply doesn't apply here. The same week Mali was under attack, Madagascar arrested a former French serviceman for allegedly plotting to destroy power infrastructure across the entire country, a plan that would have caused a nationwide blackout and expelled a French diplomat. France denied everything. We have Venezuela, Cuba, Iran, Mali, Madagascar. These are not coincidences. They are the same operation aimed at every government that refuses to stay inside the system the West has built for itself. A predatory system. Anyone would want to leave. The AES are not just 3 countries trying to survive. They are the leading edge of a sovereignty movement that the rest of Africa is watching. If it holds, countries like Ghana, Cameroon, Chad, and others have a real model to point to and follow. The Alliance of Sahel States idea spreading across the continent means the end of leaders installed to protect foreign interests, the end of deals where Africa provides the raw materials while others take profit, and the beginning of African governments making decisions for their African people. That is why this cannot be allowed to succeed from the perspective of the Western hegemony. The same reason America cannot allow Iran to anchor in the Middle East away from the petrodollar. The same reason why NATO cannot accept Russia keeping Ukraine outside of its orbit. Real sovereignty shifts power permanently away from the West. Institutions like BRICS nations now represent the alternative, Russia, China, and a growing list of nations building a world order that does not require Western approval. We're talking about the global South and the multipolar world that is inevitably coming down the line. It will not arrive without a fight. The Sahel is one of the front lines that the fight is at right now. And now you understand this war, how it's all connected. The next question is, what should Africa do about it? So if you're interested in understanding that, I suggest you watch the video that you're seeing on screen right now, and I'll catch you over there next. Peace.